He thought he was just looking for firewood. But what he found in those woods would change for lives forever. A struggling father, 2 terrified little girls, and one heartbreaking choice that would test the limits of compassion. The sun had barely risen, casting a dull orange glow over the frost-covered ground. Jackson Reyes stood beside his rusted-out pickup truck, steam rising from the cracked radiator like smoke from a broken dream. His hands, calloused from years of hard labor, trembled slightly as he held a small photograph of his late wife, Maria, smiling, holding their twin sons when they were just babies. "I'm trying, babe," he whispered. "God knows I'm trying." It had been months since the factory shut down. One by one, the odd jobs dried up. Jackson had sold his tools, his guitar, even his wedding ring just to buy food. Last night, his sons had eaten the last 2 slices of bread, and Jackson had pretended he wasn't hungry. Again, that the rent was overdue, the heater had died, and the cold was creeping in fast. The old pickup wouldn't start, and there was no firewood left. But he couldn't let his boys freeze, not after everything they'd already lost. So he did the only thing he could, grabbed a dull hatchet and set off into the woods, hoping to gather enough wood to warm their little home for one more night. His boots crunched through the frost, his breath visible in the morning air. The forest was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. As he walked deeper between the trees, a memory floated in his mind: Maria humming a lullaby, rocking their sons to sleep in front of the fireplace. It used to be a home full of love and warmth. Now, it was just a roof over their grief. Jackson stopped for a moment and leaned against a tree. He was tired, bone-tired, not just from the cold, or the hunger, or the weight of bills, but from the loneliness of holding it all together alone. Just as he was about to swing the axe, a faint sound caught his attention. Whimper. He froze. There it was, again, soft, scared a child. He turned his head toward the sound, heart racing, and slowly moved toward the trees. What he would find next would test everything he thought he knew about struggle, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be a father. Setting deep within the forest, under a massive oak tree, Jackson's boots sank slightly into the cold, damp earth as he pushed through tangled branches and brush. The sound he'd heard, so faint and fleeting, now echoed again. A cry, not an animal, not the wind. It was human, small, fragile. He stopped, scanning the woods. "Hello," he called out softly, voice cautious but kind. "Is someone there?" Silence start then. A rustle, a sniffle, a low, terrified whimper. He stepped forward slowly, carefully, parting a curtain of thorny vines. And then he saw it. 2 little girls, maybe 6, maybe 7, identical, dressed in thin, torn pajamas, barefoot, covered in dirt and bruises. Their faces were pale and hollow from cold and fear. But what made Jackson drop the axe from his hand, what made his knees nearly give out, was the sight of the thick metal chains wrapped around their small wrists, bolted to the trunk of the ancient oak tree. One girl huddled protectively in front of the other. Her lip was trembling, but she stared up at him like a cornered animal, shielding her sister behind her back. "Please," she whispered hoarsely, "don't hurt us." Jackson knelt down, hands raised in surrender, heart shattering. "No, sweetheart, I would never," he said, his voice cracking. "What happened? Who did this to you?" Neither spoke, but their eyes said enough. They didn't trust anyone. They'd been betrayed before. He moved slowly, inspecting the chains. Rusty but strong. Someone had chained them there recently like animals. Jackson's stomach turned. He knew cruelty. He had seen hard things in life. But this was evil. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. They flinched at first, but then leaned into its warmth. "You're safe now," he whispered, gently tugging at the chains. "I'm gonna get you out of here, I promise." The older girl finally met his eyes. "You're not like the others," she said softly. "No," Jackson said, fists clenched. "I'm a dad, and no child deserves this." He picked up the axe not to gather firewood, now but to break their chains. In that moment, Jackson realized, maybe he was meant to be in those woods, maybe this was his purpose, and maybe saving them would somehow save him. Jackson carried the girls through the woods in his arms, one clinging to his chest, the other resting her head against his shoulder. They were shivering, barely conscious, their wrists red and raw from the chains. He didn't know who they were, where they came from, or why someone would do something so monstrous, but none of that mattered. What mattered now was keeping them alive. By the time they reached his house, a small, drafty two-room cabinet was nearly dark. He kicked the door open and rushed them inside. His sons, Sam and Leo, looked up from the couch, eyes wide with confusion and concern. "Daddy," Leo asked softly. "It's okay," Jackson said, lowering the girls gently onto the worn-out couch. "They need our help." He wrapped them in the only extra blankets they had. His boys didn't ask questions. They just moved closer, offering their own body heat to warm the girls. Jackson lit the old kerosene lamp, its soft glow casting long shadows on the peeling walls. He made a pot of weak soup, barely enough for one, let alone 5, but he handed the bowls to the children first and told them to eat slowly. He told himself he wasn't hungry, even though his stomach groaned with emptiness. After the girls fell asleep, curled together like 2 fragile birds, Jackson sat at the edge of the couch, head in his hands. Every instinct told him to call the authorities, but something inside him hesitated. What if they got separated? What if they were sent back to whoever had done this? He didn't have much, just a broken truck, a cold house, and a heart that had been grieving for too long, but he had enough love for these girls. And love, he thought, might be the only thing that could help them now. Jackson looked at his sons, then at the girls. A strange calm came over him. He didn't choose this, but maybe this was exactly what he was meant to do. He made a decision that night, not out of heroism, but out of something deeper. He would protect them, feed them, raise them like his own, because sometimes the family you find is the family you were meant to have. The weeks that followed were harder than anything Jackson had ever faced, but something had changed. Inside that tiny house, the silence of grief had been replaced with small voices, laughter, and footsteps on creaky wooden floors. The twins, whose names he learned were Lily and Leela, began to smile, just barely at first, then freely, like they were learning to breathe again. Jackson took on every job he could find, fixing fences, hauling scrap, chopping wood for neighbors. He came home every night, exhausted, but never empty. The girls helped fold laundry. His sons read bedtime stories to them. It didn't matter that there wasn't enough of anything, they made it work. One cold afternoon, while sweeping the front porch, Jackson noticed a stranger pulling into the driveway. It was Claire, the woman who ran the local diner. She'd heard about what happened. Someone at the gas station had seen Jackson carrying the twins that night, and word had gotten around. "You found those girls, didn't you?" she asked gently, stepping out of her car. Jackson nodded, wary. "I did. I'm just trying to take care of them." Claire looked at the thin smoke rising from his chimney, then at the patched-up shoes on his feet. Without another word, she handed him a brown paper bag full of food. "Come by tomorrow," she said. "The dishwasher just quit. Job's yours if you want it." That night, Jackson cried alone on the back steps, not from sadness, but from the sudden weight of kindness. It had been so long since someone offered something without expecting anything in return. Soon after, a social worker visited. She had heard about Jackson through Claire and wanted to make sure the girls were safe. She found them warm, fed, and loved. When she asked Lily if she felt okay living there, the girl looked at Jackson and whispered, "He's our hero." Jackson turned away, overcome. He didn't feel like a hero. He was just doing what any father should do. Still, in that moment, he saw what he hadn't seen in himself for a long time: hope. And somehow, by giving everything he didn't have, he had created something that felt like a family again. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time in years, Jackson's house felt like a home. The tree was small and bare in places, but it stood proudly in the corner of the living room, covered in handmade paper ornaments, glittered stars, and a crooked angel made out of cardboard. The smell of soup simmering on the stove filled the air. There were no expensive gifts, but there was warmth, real warmth. Lily and Leela wore matching red sweaters donated by a kind neighbor. Sam and Leo helped set the table, their eyes lighting up as Jackson brought in a tiny cake from the diner, gifted by Claire. The children squealed in delight like it was a treasure. As the family sat together, Jackson looked around the table. For children, for souls he loved more than anything, he raised his cup of cocoa and said softly, "To new beginnings, and the family we didn't expect, but needed the most." Later that night, after the kids fell asleep in a pile of blankets by the fire, Jackson stepped outside into the snow. He looked up at the stars and clutched that old, worn photo of Maria. "I did what I could," he whispered. "I hope you're proud." From behind him, small arms wrapped around his waist. Lily and Leela had followed him out, barefoot in their pajamas. "We couldn't sleep," Leela said. "Can we call you Dad now?" Jackson's heart broke and healed. In the same moment, he dropped to his knees, pulling them close, tears streaming down his face. "You never have to ask," he whispered. "You always could." Inside, the fire crackled. The old house creaked as if exhaling peace. They didn't share blood, but they shared something deeper now: pain, healing, and love. And in a world that had taken so much from them. They had found one another, not by chance, but by grace. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness, one man choosing not to walk away, can change everything. Jackson had once thought he was rescuing those girls, but the truth was, they had saved him, too.